Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Climate Live K12 session for students, educators, and the public, which is a series run by the Columbia Climate School. My name is Laurel Zaima-Sheehy, and I'm going to be facilitating today's session. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Columbia Climate School or who are joining us for the first time, the Columbia Climate School is a newly established school at Columbia University for transdisciplinary climate research. The school marshals the university's strengths in basic and applied disciplines and expands its resources to understand climate and its impact on society, develop and inspire knowledge-based solutions, and educate future leaders for just and prosperous societies on a healthy planet. The Climate School is the first new school at Columbia in over 25 years, so we're extremely excited. And it incorporates more than 20 different centers and over 700 people who collaborate among many departments at the university. And through this, we're able to better connect, amplify, and advance new areas of climate inquiry, research, and impact across Columbia and beyond. And what we're hoping to do with these Climate Live K12 sessions is to introduce you all to the interdisciplinary work through our scientific experts or experts on the topic that we'll be discussing today. These monthly sessions run through the academic year through June for this 2022-2023 academic year. And if you'd like any more information about these sessions, you can visit our website. I'll put that link in the chat towards the end of this session, or you can contact us directly at learn@climate.columbia.edu. Each month we focus on a certain topic that will be directed towards a particular age range. And for this session today, which is entitled Generating Applications to Gain Acceptance, this is really a broad audience range, as we have a student that is in high school that is going to speak about applying to summer internship programs. We have an undergraduate student who can share more about their application process through summer undergraduate research programs. And we have a graduate student who's sharing about their experience in applying to grad school. And we even have a reviewer who is going to be sharing about their perspectives on what makes a really strong application. So we're really excited to be joined by these panelists today. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. So our first panelist, this individual is Maddie Milla. Maddie is a senior at Nyack High School. She'll be attending Smith College in the fall, where she plans on majoring in astronomy and swimming for the division team. She's also president of the Nyack Science Research Program, which gives students the opportunity to conduct in-depth research on any science-related topic of their choice and work with professional mentors to create a project. She spent last summer as an intern at the Columbia Climate School's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory's Next Generation of Hudson River Educators program, which is where I got to meet Madison. And she's currently finishing her senior thesis on lunar studies. So thank you, Maddie, for joining us today. Our next student is Tenzin Sherpa. Tenzin is a senior at Hamilton College, majoring in environmental studies and minoring in education studies. This past summer, Tenzin worked with the Center for Resilient Cities and Landscapes and the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice to design and facilitate workshops about climate issues and their respective adaptation strategies. In her free time, Tenzin likes to climb, crochet, and listen to music. Thanks for joining us. We also have Nicklaus Smith with us today. Nicklaus is a current graduate student at the Columbia Climate School's Master's in Climate and Society program. He's also a recent graduate of Carnegie Mellon University with a double major in social and political history and environmental and sustainability studies. His research background has focused on domestic environmental policy formation about industrial pollution in Pennsylvania and New York State. Hi, Nicklaus. Thanks for joining us. And finally, we have Cassie Zhu, who has recently departed from Columbia University after 10 years working at the Earth Institute, Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, and the Columbia Climate School. And in her time at Columbia, she has had extensive experience reviewing a variety of applications, and has a real keen eye on what makes a strong application. So Cassie has reviewed applications for summer high school research experiences, as well as scholarship applications for pre-college programs in partnership with Putney Student Travel. She's reviewed applications for summer undergraduate research experiences at both Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory and the Columbia Climate School as part of the National Science Foundation's REU program, or Research Experiences for Undergraduates. She's reviewed K12 educators that are also part of the National Science Foundation Summer Research Experience Program. And finally, reviewed applications for graduate programs in sustainability at Columbia. So lots of experience in reviewing. Thanks for joining as well, Cassie. Amazing. Okay, so we are now going to move on to our questions. So if you as a member of the audience have any particular questions to ask any of our panelists today, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of our Zoom webinar platform. We will have time at the end to ask all of your Q&A questions. So feel free to populate those as soon as they pop into your head, and we'll address them at the end. And definitely don't hold back on any questions, because a question that you have might be one that someone else in the audience has as well. So more the merrier. All right, everyone. So first, I would love to hear a little bit more about these programs that you were involved in and what particularly drew you to these programs in the first place. So Nicklaus, can we start with you and your experience in the Masters in Climate and Society program at the Columbia Climate School?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I really enjoy the Masters in Climate and Society so far. I'm just about to start my second semester of the program, and yeah, I come from a pretty interdisciplinary background during my undergrad experience. So I was really looking for a master's program that capitalized on that interdisciplinary nature that I sought out, and I think it does a really great job of distilling a very particular set of environmental and sustainability knowledge, particularly focusing on climate, that everyone in the program comes from a different background, that they're able to kind of apply this very particular climate knowledge to their respective discipline. I think the main thing that attracted me to the Masters in Climate Society was definitely that aspect of so much collaboration between people that you may not get to meet otherwise. If I was in, say, a master's program for policy or for management or something, I think it does a really astute and thorough job at kind of having a really inclusive environment. So yeah, that's what initially drew me to it, and I'm hoping to kind of use the pipeline from the climate school and the Masters in Climate Society to have a successful postgraduate experience and pre-professional pipeline that's kind of built into the program as well. So yeah, that's just a little bit about that.
Thank you so much for sharing. I love the focus on this transdisciplinary learning and the ability to learn from other students in your cohort and the alumni as well. And the fact that everyone comes from different backgrounds makes it such a rich learning experience as well. That sounds wonderful. And Tenzin, would you like to share about your interest in the REU program that you participated in last summer at the Climate School?
Yeah, definitely. So before applying to Columbia, I had done a similar sort of REU experience. I really liked it. I hadn't really done research in sort of this context prior to attending college. And so I was looking for a similar experience. Being from New York City myself, I was really looking at programs close to home that summer, and came upon the Columbia Climate School's REU. And I just was looking at the projects as I was building my application, and I found that so many of the projects sort of were attuned to my interests and had that, like Nicklaus was saying, sort of transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary approach to their sort of research methods. And also the what I really liked was sort of this inclusion of communities that they were researching or addressing And like I said, being from New York City myself, I find this really important and really wanted to do something that hit a little closer to home this summer. So yeah, I mean, I think I liked having that sort of proximity, both academically and personally. Yeah, and it made that experience that much more special.
Oh, yeah. I can see doing projects that are having a direct impact on the community where you live being super powerful for those that are involved. I absolutely understand that. And Maddie, will you like to share about your experience in the Next Gen program and how you found out about it? What was your interest in it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Next Gen program taught interns all about Hudson River science through hands-on field investigation. And we participated in activities like seining, water chemistry, electroshock eel fishing, which was tons of fun. And after learning so much about the Hudson River's biodiversity and cleanliness and history, we shared what we learned with the people in our communities through interviews to try and give the Hudson River a better rep and to inform them of how lucky we are to have this tidal estuary so close to where we live. So that was tons of fun. I think what initially made me interested in the program was just trying something new. I am more on the astronomy, planetary science side of the science spectrum. So I really wanted to just try something new to try and, narrow down my passion as I narrow down what I want to study as I get closer to heading off to college.
Amazing. Yes, I think that's also so important. It really helps to understand all of your passions because as humans, I feel like we're very complex. We have a lot of interests and passions in a variety of areas.
Absolutely.
Amazing. All right. So each one of these programs, I'm sure they have very different application processes. Maybe some are the same throughout, but I would love to hear from each of you about what the process requirements were like for these programs and how did you start preparing these materials? Nicklaus, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think the process of applying to graduate school was the most different that I had experienced so far from applying to undergrad. Yeah, it's a lot more in depth and a lot more personal of an experience, I would say, if you're applying to a big university when you're a senior in high school. Personally, I applied for graduate school when I was a senior in undergrad, so I went straight in. I didn't take any time between to start my master's. And I know that's not the case for a lot of people, and it's very, very case by case. But yeah, so in terms of materials and the way that kind of process started, I think looking at the statement of academic purpose, which is kind of comparable to an essay prompt as a writing sample for undergraduate applications. So I really focused on that being one of the main kind of driving points of my personal application. I think the actual prompt for the MA Climate Society program has changed quite a bit since the program's conception and like what it's actually manifesting as today. So I think it's really a wonderful opportunity to kind of explain your background, explain anything on your resume that might stand out, talk about experiences that have been meaningful to you and how all of that holistically has kind of shaped you into the person that will succeed in whatever program you're applying to. Additionally, the recommendation letters are also a really, really big part of the application process to grad school because you are able to kind of use people, whether it's in a professional capacity or academic capacity through research processes that you engage in undergrad, that you're really able to use the resources available to you to really make sure that your recommenders have a really wonderful understanding of you as a person that they've worked with or a student that they've encountered. So I think those are really important, and to have a really special kind of unique relationship with that recommender is always definitely additive. Additionally, resumes, I ended up submitting a CV for the first time, which felt different to me as opposed to just a regular resume. It felt like too long in some regards, but I was like, I just need to like include all of the experience. So I make sure that I look like I have the proper credentials and capabilities to do well in this program that I'm applying to. Yeah, and every grad program that I applied to was slightly different. Some were international programs, which have a whole other set of requirements and kind of hoops to jump through. But I did end up going to a school in the US, so none of that really mattered anyway. But yeah, it's a lot of moving parts, but it's definitely a way for you to really represent yourself and advocate for yourself in a way that is conducive to whatever program you're applying to, and kind of putting your best foot forward. And additionally, I will say that like in the grad school process, something that I found that was more personalized was that you are kind of interviewing the program as much as they are looking at you and seeing how you would fit in. I remembered a couple of the programs that I was a prospective student for. I was really interested in seeing what the actual day-to-day life was on campus. So I went to tour, and I went to sit in on courses and see like, is this the best thing for me? I mean, I think I would be an excellent candidate for this program itself, but does this feel right to me? And will you give me the resources that I need to kind of succeed at whatever my postgraduate goals are? So I think that that's a really special and kind of like unique lens to put on for grad school, particularly because it is a little bit more rigorous and a little bit more serious of an experience than I personally had in undergrad. So I think that that's something really important to consider as well.
Oh, that is such a good point, that it's got to be a right fit for everyone involved, that this might be the perfect program for you, and you will also be adding to that learning environment for the program. There are benefits from both sides for sure that need to be considered. I just, particularly for grad school, I wanted to ask, do you have a sense of the importance of the transcripts that you send, the GPA, any testing that you have to do? Do you have a sense of the weight that's placed on that in your application process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think personally for me, my transcript submission for grad school was actually not as stressful as I felt like it was when I was in high school applying to undergrad. You don't really have to include any high school transcripts or experience. I just listed that I did in fact graduate from high school, so that was not something that I really had to stress about too much. But yeah, GPA and overall course performance does play a huge factor into whatever kind of university or program you're going into. But also if you're kind of deviating from whatever degree you were granted in your undergraduate experience and you're applying to a grad school in another field, there might be some room for flexibility. And if you happen to take courses in, say, atmospheric chemistry or anything like that, and you really succeeded at it, and you're trying to go more into that than say ecology, then they'll see that on your transcripts and say, okay, well, they did really, really well in these particular courses that we think are more supplemental to whatever educational environment we're fostering here. So I think that there's definitely a lot more of a porous kind of flexible matrix that exists in that regard. Test scores, I think, are a really interesting thing. I personally sought out programs that I didn't have to take a GRE, or that I wasn't planning on taking the GRE. So I was particularly looking at programs that didn't require that for any kind of consideration or admission. But that's a personal thing. I know some folks take the GRE and then a lot of programs reach out to them on their behalf because they see that there was an exceptional test score on the GRE and trying to integrate them into a program. So that's definitely a very unevenly distributed kind of case by case phenomenon as well, based on whatever the student's personal experience or desire is. So
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Those are really, really good insights. Tenzin, do you want to share about the application process for the REU program that you applied for?
Yeah, definitely. Like many other programs, had to send in a transcript, resume. What I was mostly focused on throughout the application process and making sure that I really had right was my personal statement, just because that's really the place where you can convey a lot of, the experiences that you've done, and, your hopes for the future. I sort of went into it thinking of my personal statement like a narrative, like a personal narrative. And what I had worked on in my personal statement was trying to weave my experiences into sort of like a story of me and how my past research, academic, personal experiences fit into sort of the goals and missions of the REU program. And also, there was just like a section about what research you were interested in, and so I went into why like I was interested in a certain project over another, also just talking about like relevant classwork, just things that I've done over the years. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's my perspective over time, like having applied to college meant like a few years ago, I think my perspective has definitely changed on application processes. And I've realized that over time, like as much as transcripts and, like grades and experiences are important, that if you aren't able to sort of put it all together and, explain to whoever's reading your application why that makes you the person you are today and why that sort of pushes you to do what you want to do in the future, then, like there isn't that strength that your application really needs to succeed. Yeah.
That is such a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, that it's not all about your grades or your test scores or things like that. It really, you want to pop off the page in your personal statement. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that because I think that's such a key piece to a strong application. So I'm glad you and Nicklaus have already touched on that a bit. And Maddie, the application process for a summer internship, what was your experience with something like that?
Yeah, so I think for both Next Gen and the science research program at my high school, I really just allocated the time to sit down and really read through the application and really understand what it was asking of me. So if I'm remembering correctly, I know the Next Gen did ask a lot of some pretty personal questions. And I think a big part of why my application for Next Gen and science research were successful was passion. If you're applying to something, if you're applying for a program or an internship, you're applying for something that you're passionate about and you're applying for something that you're going to have fun doing. So just making sure that I showed my passion through my writing was a big thing, and highlighting the skills that I knew I had that would enable me to contribute to the program was a big part of it too. But yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. We want to see as reviewers that this is a strong interest of yours, and that you're going to enjoy it and thrive in this environment. So I think having a really passionate letter also is a critical piece. Cassie, I wanted to pull you in to hear what you are looking for as a reviewer. Like, what is one of the first things you're looking for in a strong application?
Thanks, Laurel. So I think there's a couple of things before I kind of answer that question in a roundabout way. So I think the first thing I'll say is that regardless of the program that is being reviewed or the applicants, these reviewer or these applications are usually done in groups or in teams. So it's not always just one person. And so that is really important for individuals and students who are applying to these programs to understand that, you may have one reviewer who pays a little more attention to a transcript, but you may have a reviewer that may also pay a little more attention to certain experiences. And then there's a process where different people from different backgrounds with different experiences will review the applications. And then there's usually a discussion of some kind, sometimes a fairly heated discussion, but in a very good way about, program fit. It does not end in a fist fight, but it's a lively conversation. And that's important to remember, because how we might perceive a fit into a particular program for an individual might vary from the person who's sitting next to us. So there's not, I don't think there's one sort of magical thing. We look for all these things that everyone has brought up here today. We look at the sort of bigger picture. And big questions like, and you've all brought this up, things like your fit within a program. How will this contribute to an individual's academic and professional careers, but also how you as an individual might contribute to an overall cohort. We think about the balance of the cohort as well, because we don't, everyone comes to these programs, regardless of level, with very different experiences. And we wouldn't want, let's say, 100 of those individuals to be the absolute, like the same person. And so there, these programs also look for that. And I think those are important things to remember. I think, qualities like passion and commitment and just general interest is really important. Spending the time to explain to us what the particular program you're applying to, how that's going to contribute to either your professional career, your personal interests, all of the above. And I think I see this in a lot of applications and questions, particularly from, high school students. And, I always have to remind them, you don't have to have changed the world and we don't expect you to change the world. So popping off the page does not mean that you have had to, save the world in some way. Trust me, all the reviewers that are reviewing your applications, most of us have not changed the world but it's about how you communicate what you have done and what you're interested in doing with the particular program that you're applying for, and to make it genuine. And again, I think realizing that there's a group of us that reviews the applications is an important piece, because it's not just, myself and one other person. There's always multiple rounds of reviews. We come back, and that's why sometimes we also ask for interviews depending on the program. We want to talk to the applicants, because you can, it's very difficult to judge just from a piece of paper, or multiple pieces of paper. So I think those are some important points to keep in mind.
Thanks, Cassie. That's some really great insider intel there. Knowing that it's a group of reviewers. I think maybe some of our listeners that are tuning in weren't aware of that. So that's really great to know and to keep in mind when writing your applications. All right. So one piece that we had talked about that seems pretty consistent throughout all of these programs is the ability to share about yourself in a personal statement. I know all of these personal statements are probably, the prompts are going to differ based on the program, but I would love to hear from each of you about how you decided on a topic for this statement to best represent yourself, and if there was a certain brainstorming process that got you there. So Nicklaus, I'll start with you again, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think just calling back to something that Cassie said was just approaching with this really strong sense of being genuine in your actual pursuit of whatever that program is going to offer you. I know that the statements of purpose or statements of academic intent, they all vary. I know that looking back at my my application to undergrad is insanely different from the one that I ended up submitting for grad school, because of how much more specialized and fine-tuned and specific a lot of the differences between going for just a general degree and then going for something that's really, really hyper-focused. I think, yeah, in formulating a statement of purpose, I would definitely say just make sure you're hitting all the parts of the prompt as well. I had to outsource, and this is a great recommendation, I think, for anyone in any kind of point in any kind of application process, but whether you're in high school or you're in undergrad and applying to grad school, that use whatever resources you have on your campus, whether it be like a global communication center or a writing center, to really, really help you look through these statements that you write, because there could be things that are part of the prompt that you missed, or stuff that can come off as really, really confusing based on just getting a second set of eyes on it. So be open to revisions and suggestions and edits by other people. I think that was something that I did when I was applying to grad school that was really, really meaningful, because I ended up going to the writing center on my undergrad campus, and the woman that helped me had a personal research experience in sustainability issues from years ago, and she was really able to like understand the language that I was kind of speaking and help me really fine tune it so it matched what I was intending to kind of convey throughout my statement of purpose, specifically for the Columbia Climate School. So yeah, I say just approach with your heart and your mind, but also coming from a place of being open to the possibilities of revision and edits, and always arriving at another draft afterwards. So I would say start that process earlier than you were expecting to as well, because you always have time to fine tune as you continue to go on.
Amazing. That was perfect. I think we need to take advantage. If you are an undergrad right now, take advantage of those writing centers, those career centers. They can help you with your personal statement. They can also help you in formatting your CV if you've never done one before. So take advantage of these resources. And Nicklaus, I love that you mentioned having someone review your statement, because having another set of eyes is going to make your statement stronger. And if you are able to convey a message to someone that's reviewing, that is someone in the field or even someone outside of the field, and they know exactly why you want to be a part of that program and what your driving motivation is, perfect. If not, then you're going to have to rethink some things. But I think having that additional perspective is always very useful. Tenzin, what about you in your brainstorming process to create a personal statement?
Yeah, whenever I am writing any kind of statement or response in an application, I always start with some very like loose, rough outline of just like notes, things I've done, ideas I have in my head. And then as I'm like actually getting to sort of form and write out sort of the details of the statement itself, I'm really looking for like themes in the experiences that I've done, and like as you mentioned earlier, just like really grounding myself within that theme. And so I was looking at the application or the personal statement that I had submitted for the REU this past summer, and I talk a lot about just like my passion for climate justice and how that's not only rooted in my academic experiences and research extracurriculars, but that's also, rooted in my past. And as I mentioned earlier, like growing up in New York City, I think that like weaving that in and sort of explaining how that manifests within sort of the experiences that I've chosen to participate in have been really crucial to like nailing down that story and having sort of a cohesive one at that. I agree that like having people read over work is also really important. I've definitely had several eyes look over any application that I've submitted, because there comes a point where you're just like looking at the thing you've written over and over again, and the words just start to blur together. So it's always great to just have someone, like look at what you've done and maybe point out something. And it's always also like good to have someone who doesn't know the field that you're in, like look at your stuff, because there may be things that, I think that like, oh, like I know what that is. That's pretty like self-explanatory, but someone else may not know. And so, yeah, I mean, I think just really focusing on how, like that central theme, and conveying it through your experiences, as well as having several set of eyes look at your work, really helps.
Yeah, and I love how you kind of explained it like a story, like it's a story about you, and why you want to be a part of the program. So I love thinking about it that way as well. And Maddie, the next gen statement was a little bit unique. I don't know if you remember the prompts that we had, or the different styles that you could have submitted. If you don't,
could you remind me?
Sure. So the program is really focused on, as Madison had already mentioned, this scientific exploration to learn about the Hudson, and then communicating that back with their community so we could increase environmental stewardship. And so given the spirit of communication, the personal statement could be in the form of an essay, but it also could be a video, it could be a song, it could be anything. And we encouraged creativity from the applicants. So if I'm remembering correctly, I think Madison, you chose an essay. But how did you choose an essay? And your writing was actually very creative as well. So I'd love to hear your process in developing that.
Thank you. So it was the summer after my sophomore year that I had applied, and I had taken my favorite English class ever. It was just 11, or what was it? English 10 honors. And I had a lot of fun with it. So I thought my writing had improved significantly from freshman year. So I decided to go ahead with the essay. And once again, it all stemmed from passion. So I just connected, even though it was environmental science and astronomy very different, I connected the two together to try and bring that out in my application. And I wrote about the first time I looked through a professional telescope. So that I think really helped create a piece that showed my passion for science in general. But it wasn't only for next gen, but also for my college application, which I just finished up, so pretty recent. I followed all of the steps that Nicklaus and Tenzin shared. I had my essay done before junior year was over, and I was ready to just spend the summer editing it. But then in August of last summer, I had met two of my cousins for the first time when I went on a trip to Peru, and they had such a strong passion for astronomy. So I'm meeting these members of my family for the first time, and I'm seeing so much of myself in them. So that was fascinating. And I wrote my college essay about them. So I completely scrapped the essay that I had prepared, that I was preparing my entire junior year. And I completely switched the topic and wrote about meeting them for the first time, and tied it into astronomy since they had shared that passion with me. But I think overall, just writing a personal statement from the heart, like Nicklaus said, is extremely important, and not being afraid to stress accomplishments. My godmother was the one helping me through this whole like college application process, and I was afraid that it, you know, when you're stressing your accomplishments, when you're writing about your accomplishments, it kind of comes off of as if you're bragging, but you're really trying to sell yourself to whoever is reading your personal statement, whoever is reviewing your college application. So yeah, when I was listing out my accomplishments, writing about my accomplishments, it was important to know that it's just reasons as to why they should accept you. You're giving them reasons as to why you are qualified. You're more than qualified for this program or for this college.
Oh, thank you for sharing your journey in writing. That was so amazing. And you're absolutely right. This is the time where you can brag a little bit about yourself, share about your academic abilities and accomplishments. This is definitely that time to do it. So thanks for sharing. Cassie, did you want to share anything about your experience in reviewing personal statements?
So I will just say that it is, I absolutely agree with everything everyone has said thus far, especially on the last piece about accomplishments. Yes, you should definitely brag. And at the same time, I know I've seen applications where students also do a really good job in talking about failure. And it's not, you know, I don't encourage you to talk about all your failures, but I think there are some important lessons that we can gain. I've seen this most often when it comes to grades and students. I've seen a lot of applications where students explain in a very good way why, let's say, first or second year of college didn't go as planned, because as we all know, things don't always go as planned. And even I remember when I was applying for graduate school, I had a terrible first year in college as a freshman. I couldn't keep up. I was almost failing all of my classes. And but I used that, and it was a huge learning experience for me because the jump from high school to college was really difficult, and life gets in the way. And there's experiences where some of us might not end up finishing college in the same way that we had planned. Maybe we take a break. Maybe we stop to work between undergrad and graduate studies. Maybe we totally fail all our science classes or our math classes. I almost failed an economic class. That was the closest. That was really interesting. You know, but these are things that we remember, but these are also things that we have learned from. And there are, if you have gaps or information like that in your resume or in your transcript and you don't explain them, that's almost a bit more of a, not a red flag, but it makes us wonder, you know, why you haven't necessarily addressed that. And it's not just about grades, but it's, you know, if you ended up taking a longer amount of time to finish your undergraduate studies, and what did you do? Maybe you took a year off, maybe you took 2 years off, maybe you had a family situation come up. Those are things that we want to know, because the last thing I think you want to do when you have an application is leave your reviewers with even more questions. So it's not a bad thing to talk about something that you and it's not, maybe it's not a failure, but it's something that you had to try at again. Or there's a reason for gaps. You know, I've seen plenty of applications where students might have, let's say, for example, not done well in a series of classes during their undergraduate studies, but then ended up retaking those classes at night at community college, re-entering college, re-entering an undergraduate program, finishing up much later. They have a very different type of experience, but we also value that experience and that life experience. So it's really important to remember that, you know, just because it might have not worked out, those are still things that are valuable to reviewers.
Thanks, Cassie. Yeah, I think I didn't even think about a personal statement by starting with failures, but that's really how we grow the most as like just human beings, is by trying, taking a risk, failing, learning from it, bettering ourselves. So kind of using that as maybe a hook is a very unique approach. Amazing. So one very, very quick question, but it got touched on a couple times. Nicklaus, you mentioned that you have to start early in writing these statements. Maddie, you said you wrote for your whole junior year. Can I hear just briefly from each of you, how long does it take to write something like this? And really, how much time should someone give themselves?
Yeah, I guess I can start. Yeah, so I think, yeah, my story is actually probably pretty different from a lot of people who realized that they wanted to go to graduate school a lot earlier than I did. I started my application to grad school in November of my senior year of undergrad, which I still submitted by the priority deadline, but I was able to really like get all my materials together quickly. I don't necessarily recommend that because I knew I was pressed to kind of get everything in and like feel really confident about it as I was submitting it, and not just feel like I was just checking boxes. You know, I wanted to actually be a really good representation of myself and of my background academically and experientially. So yeah, I think it definitely varies on the program and the required materials. So I would say use your own personal discretion to whatever program you're applying to. But yeah, I would definitely say 3 to 4 months in advance, and especially with those recommendation letters, you have to reach out to your recommenders much earlier than you think, because they will take longer than you were expecting, and you will be like coming down to the wire and saying, oh my gosh, my application's due in a week and neither of them have uploaded it yet, like I need to have this. So also keeping that line of communication going and asking far in advance, so you have those like off of your mind, and you're able to really focus on your other materials in your full ability. So yeah.
Thanks. We're going to touch on recommenders in a little bit. But yes, good point. Definitely start early with those.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything Nicklaus said. So in school, we were encouraged to start as early as our junior year. I started after finals and AP exams, just because that's its own stress. So I started after all that. Well, not writing the personal statement, I started beginning of junior year. But as for all of the components of my application, I started end of junior year. And I kind of just used my summer and used the time, any extra time that I had during the summer, to keep working on it. So I think time management is a huge thing, and any free time you have, use it to better your application in any way that you can. Yeah, I would definitely say 3 to 4 months in advance is enough time to gather all of the necessary components that you need for the application.
Awesome. And Tenzin, just want to check that timeline sounds good for you too? 2 to 3 to 4, what? 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to say the like RU internship timeline is slightly different. So I think for that specifically, I wasn't using that much time, but I think I might have mentioned before this video started that I'm applying to grad school now. And so for that, I've definitely taken a lot more time, definitely like 3 to 4 months. I think I started my applications in like September, early August, but for the RU, I think I started looking at programs around November, and then I think Columbia opened sometime in December or January. And so then I really started just focusing on my statements, making sure to look at it as much as I can, but also not like, keep sort of going over it. But yeah, I mean, I think at this point, or at least, you continue to learn how you work as an individual. And so some people may need a lot of more time and some people may not. That's really based on you, but I would say like you definitely do need like a couple months to, get everything set up. Recommendations, things like that are really important, things that you just don't necessarily have control over when specific documents and things like that are submitted. But yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a good point. The REU timeline is a little bit crunched, so not as much time, but yeah, all good insights. So looking at the clock, we have about 10 minutes left. So for anyone who is joining us live, feel free to populate that Q&A with any questions that you may have. But in the meantime, I'll just keep asking our panelists questions. So recommenders, a lot of these applications have them. Do you have any advice on reaching out to a mentor? Maybe who is the right mentor to choose and what is the best approach in asking them?
Yeah, I suppose I can popcorn with that first. I think the most important thing when selecting recommenders and thinking about how someone can best represent or speak on your behalf and recommend you, there's definitely a lot of value in choosing people that know you in different capacities, whether that be a professor of yours that you had a class you excelled in or really, really enjoyed and got to have a personal connection with, or if it was a research advisor, or if it's someone that you worked with professionally. This is pretty untraditional, but my recommenders for the Columbia Climate School admissions for the master's program, the application is different now because it only requires 2, but the previous application cycle, it did require 3. 2 of mine were from an academic source, and 1 was from a professional source. And professional, not even in a way that I think really is conducive to a lot of professional experiences that people had. I worked in a coffee shop during my undergrad experience, and I happened to get involved with a local nonprofit sustainable organization. Sorry, my cat is like making an appearance. She loves to pop into these things. Anyway, so it was through someone that I'd interacted with, but she was also involved with me in that regard, and she got to see how I spearheaded a lot of initiatives in this like coffee shop that I was working at. But it was still such a valuable person that could speak to how I behave in environments that are not just academic in nature. And my other 2 were research advisors and professors that I had gotten really, really close with. So yeah, I definitely choose like this multi-pronged approach for people that can really, really speak to your kind of diversity of experience and how you exist in different places. I think that's really important.
Oh, hugely important, and a really good point. If you have the ability to choose 3, many applicant or recommenders, having that diversity of mentors that know you in these different capacities is always useful. Tenzin, I think the REU requested 2 recommenders, both academic recommenders. So how did you go about choosing your mentors that would write for you?
I believe that, both of my recommenders were professors that I currently have or have previously had in my undergraduate experience. I want to say that I think that I really focused on who I had the most experience with, whether that was like inside or outside the classroom, just because that way they see you grow as a student over time, and are not only seeing you for, 1 semester. So I ended up choosing one of my environmental studies professors who was also my advisor. And so, like at the same time, he was also helping me look for research experiences to do in the summer. And then on the flip side, I had chosen one education studies professor who I continue to take classes to this day. Yeah, she's amazing. And it's definitely not like your typical, like, STEM, environmental, professor but I think like Nicklaus was saying, like it's really valuable to get input from people who may not fit within that traditional sort of recommender. I know that I still had to choose a professor, but I think for me, it was important to convey that I was using this interdisciplinary approach that I was sort of putting out in my application, and also showing the group of people reading my applications that I was able to achieve within sort of multiple contexts, multiple academic contexts. But yeah, that's really what I was looking for in my recommenders.
Amazing. One thing that you said that I love is that someone that has seen you grow throughout time. That is so critical. If you did well in a class, that's great. I'm sure there are also a lot of people who did well in a class throughout, as many years as that professor had been teaching. But if this one advisor has seen you from freshman year to senior year, then they can speak much deeper on you as a student and a person that will really enhance that letter. And Maddie, what about you with your recommenders?
Yeah, so very similarly to Tenzin, I chose 2 teachers that I spent the most time with in high school. And I chose my mentor that I've been working with in science research. I've been working with all of them for the past 3 years. So they could definitely, I knew that they would be perfect recommenders to write about my growth over the time in music or in orchestra or in the science research program, or doing the work for my mentor for that amount of time. And I think picking recommenders from different areas, just like Nicklaus said, and showing your how diverse you are and how involved you are in multiple different areas is important, because music and science are very different. So there was that. And I think just in general, being sure to state why you're asking them to be your recommender is important, like based on my time, or based on our time together and the work I've accomplished with your guidance, I've decided to pursue whatever career, and I would greatly appreciate if you could write me a letter of recommendation. So, and obviously being sure to keep it professional.
Yes, of course. And Cassie, you've written many letters of recommendation. So from this recommender perspective, what is something that students need to know in reaching out to someone to write a letter for them?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad, Maddie, you brought up that last point about reminding the letter writer why you're asking him or her or them for a letter, because a lot of students will also go to those same individuals for letters. And it's really important. I know someone at Lamont who used to ask students to provide them with a few bullet points about almost just jotting their memory a little bit about key things to touch on, how they know them. We might have lost Nicklaus, but all good. But I think it's really important to remind your recommendation letter writers why you're asking them, jog their memory about their about how you know them, and also what potentially key points you might want to hit. It's often worth a phone call or an in-person meeting, even if it's 10 minutes, just to say, here's a program, here's why I want to apply for this program, and here's why I think I'm qualified for this program, and I could really use your help in getting that letter together. And of course, making sure they know the deadline. A lot of programs will give letter writers a bit more time to submit a letter, because we all know that everyone is super busy. So just being aware of those deadlines. And then the last thing I'll say is, I think it's really important for any of these, as you're putting your applications together, there's like a 99% chance, I mean, it's not always, that there is an information session about the program that you're applying to, and sometimes multiple over a period of time. It is so important just to go to those, whether they're virtually or if they're done in person, even better. And if you can make it, even better, because there's often things that you will learn that you will not necessarily get from a website. And you can read a website over and over again, but it will not replace human interaction or what you might get in a live session like this one with Q&A. And that's honestly where a lot of things that you might be wondering are also going to come up from other potential applicants as well. So I think that's a good place for me to leave it. Yeah.
Perfect. And we are actually exactly at 5 o'clock. So thank you all for joining us. This has been so helpful, I hope, for everyone that's watching in creating their own applications that are going to gain acceptance for whether it be a summer internship, undergraduate school, graduate school, or anything else. So if you end up having any questions about any of these programs or any targeted questions for any of our panelists, feel free to email learn@climate.columbia.edu and I will be able to answer those questions or connect you if the panelists are willing and able. But thank you again to our amazing panelists. Unfortunately, Nicklaus is having computer issues, so he had to pop off. But to everyone, I really appreciate you spending the last hour with us chatting about this.